Today we are going to be in the book of James, chapter 1. James, chapter 1. I'd like to talk to you today about being practical Christian life, practical Christianity. And the reason I would like to talk to you, I'm sorry, Terry, I'm supposed to slow down. He says it's like you race back and forth up here, Chuck. I get kind of excited though, right? Being practical in our lives. Now, we've probably all heard the term, well, that sounds good on paper, but it's not quite practical, right? Practical, just an adjective, means that, well, it's advantageous, right? That it's advantageous to us. Illustration of this. One of my favorite YouTubers. Now, I've reached that magic age, so I don't sleep a whole lot, you know. So you get up in the middle of the night, you watch YouTube. Guy's name is James Wright. He's not funny. You kids will hate him, okay? He looks a lot like me. He's got a beautiful head. Beautiful head. And you can see all of it, kind of like mine. But he likes to work wood in a traditional manner, and I like to do that myself. Well, someone did a one-tool challenge on this guy. They said, can you build a box with just one tool? Bill, you'll appreciate this. So he took a chisel and a piece of firewood, and he chopped out this box. And it worked. It looked all right. But at the end of it, he said, man, that sure wasn't the best way to do it. It worked, but it sure wasn't the best way to do it. He goes, if I could have used the rest of my tools and split that wood and then planed it down and then cut some dovetails, I could have made the exact same box, except it would have lasted longer and it would have looked better. And I thought, you know what? That's like me a lot of times with the tools God has given me to live this life. I've got this entire tool chest of them, and sometimes I just forget about some of them. And I try to go about, and I use one or two, and I am not very practical in my application of Christianity sometimes. So I don't think I'm going to tell you guys anything new today. But I hope I remind you of something. I hope I remind you of some of the tools that are stashed at the back of your toolbox. And a saw is a lot easier to cut a hunk of wood with than a chisel. I started to try that, and I decided, no, I like my chisels too much. I don't want to sharpen them all day, right? So here's what we want to do. We want to look at how we can, as we go through this life, live the practical Christian life. Use the tools, all of these tools God is giving us, and He's teaching us how to use them. And keep using them so that we can be effective for Him. Okay? So we can be effective through Him. James chapter 1, verse 1 says this. I won't read through verse 12. James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad, greetings. This is where it gets hard. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith, without doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. And the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass. Its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man, in the midst of his pursuits, will fade away. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. For once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Okay. Let's talk about this for a little bit. Who are the persons involved in this? We see James, right? We see James. Now, we know this is James, the brother of Christ. His nickname was, you guys know, Old Camel Knees, right? Old Camel Knees, because he prayed so much, they said his knees looked like camel's knees. That's a lot of praying. He was not an apostle, although in Galatians, you remember whenever Paul was talking about going back to Jerusalem? He says, I didn't talk to any of the apostles except James, the brother of Christ. So maybe Paul considered him apostle, kind of out of time or out of place, like he was. James is the leader of the church at Jerusalem. And he has a unique relationship with Christ. He is the brother. Could you imagine getting to call Jesus your big brother? I would have used that on the playground. I would have. But James gets to call Jesus his big brother. But he doesn't say, hey, I'm James, the little brother of Jesus, does he? He says, I'm James, I'm a slave. I'm a bondservant of God and of Jesus Christ. James was not playing upon his physical relationship with Jesus, was he? But he wanted to emphasize his spiritual relationship with Jesus. So he could talk to these people, these 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. Now, more than likely, these were Jewish Christians, although you can also make the argument that the early church talked about general Christians as the 12 tribes. I still think it's very, very pertinent to our lives, to who we are. Why were they scattered abroad? There was fear there. And what did God use that fear for? Acts chapter 8 says, therefore those who had been scattered went about preaching the word, right? Okay, let me ask you guys a question here. This will be easy when you don't have to stand up. Do your arms work? Okay. If you were not, I won't say born. If you did not come to Amarillo until you were, say, 16 or 18 years old, if you were not born here and you came here afterwards, raise your hand. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, a lot of us, right? Now, there's a lot of people that, I was a little bit younger than that, but I did get here as quick as my parents would bring me, right? We've been scattered right to here. How many people do you know from this church that are scattered out? Alan's in Dallas. Why? Because 3 of his 4 girls live in Dallas. They got scattered there. We're scattered out. And they were scattered out to proclaim this gospel. And so James wants to talk to them and say, okay, here's some things that we need to learn. Here's some tools that God has given you that I really think you can use to live a wonderful Christian life. So, the first tool. You love this one, don't you? Count it all joy, brethren, when you what? Fall into face these various trials. Who loves trials? You know what the word is? The word, wait, are there any teachers or retired teachers in here? Okay, you guys close your ears, okay? I think teachers, my teachers at least, hated me. That's why they gave me tests, right? The word is testing. Teachers test us because they give us information. They try to let us take that information and that knowledge, and something goes on up here, some chemical process, or in my case, no chemical process went on up there, right? And then they give us a paper or maybe a hunk of steel and a lathe and say, okay, now you're supposed to do this, right? You didn't raise your hand. You're a teacher. Oh, did you? I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I thought she was cheating. I was going to catch a teacher cheating. No, Never volunteer for anything Chuck says. I don't blame you. They give you that test so that you can regurgitate that knowledge and prove that you know it, right? Now, James says, listen, you count it all joy when you're falling into these various trials, these various testings. Now, testing and temptation is the exact same word in the Greek New Testament, okay? But if you read a little bit further down in James, he says, God will not tempt you, right? God will not tempt you. But will God give us tests? Yes. The difference is all in what they're for, whether it's tempting us to sin or testing us that we can use the tools God gave us. And these tests, I love the wording of this. It's like they're raining down and like they're different colors. Now, I know I'm probably the only one in this room that is going through trials or tests, right? Sometimes the trials, boy, they are very different colored, right? They're multifaceted. It may be a trial on my health or your health. It may be a financial trial, right? It may be a trial with our family or our kids or, well, the list goes on and on and on. But what we're supposed to do is count it joy. When I think of this, I think of those little boys on Wednesday night. You know, we teach some boys on Wednesday night. And we do a lot of hammering, you know, a lot of hammering. And sometimes we will get one that comes up to us. And we'll have their little piece of wood there. We'll tell them, okay, hammer those nails in, and you're going to make a box or whatever it is. And they will say, Mr. Chuck, I can't do that. So in the most fatherly voice that I can, the most loving way I can get across to them, I look at them and I say, I don't care. You try it. I don't care if you're doubting. I don't care if you don't think you can do this. I've given you the tools. Try it. Try it. All of these things are coming down around us. And when you see those little boys and they hammer those nails in and half of them bust out the side and the other halves are all bent over, they come up and they got that smile on their face. They do, don't they? And then the next time, Brian knows this because his fingers are just as sore as mine, he helps with it, right? The next time they come up, and sometimes they say the exact same thing, I can't do this. Have you tried? No? We'll go try. And guess what? They only have half as many bent over. Now, our fingers are still just as sore, but they only have half as many bent over, and the smile, if you can believe it, is bigger. It's a test. It's a test. Does anyone remember going into a test in school and you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're going to make a 12? My first year Greek professor is a friend of mine. He's a really great guy. And I did really well on the midterm. Well, the final's coming up. And so he decided to mess with me a little bit. And so he said, okay, this is what I think, you know, usually we do 1 John, you know, you translate 1 John. He said something like Romans chapter 9, you know. And so I get into this test, and I'm like, if I make a 12, it's going to be great. This stuff that he put on, I mean, he was just messing with me. And guess what? I made a good grade on it. And I was so relieved. I counted it joy. Is it fun to go through sickness? Not really. It's not. Was it fun to go through high school? Todd and Lori are the only ones who had fun in high school. I didn't have a whole lot of fun in high school. Well, not in the class part, at least. Right? I didn't enjoy going through it. But guess what? All those things that they taught me, they help, right? Count it all joy. So if we want to be practical, these trials make us practical. there's a purpose to them. The purpose is to cause this calm delight, this joy, if you will. But there's also a product. Let's see. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. The product is a lot like we find over in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7, that we've went through this trial by fire. Let it have its proof. The product is that we become these people who can do it. We become the people that have went through the training, and we've practiced with our saws, or we've practiced with our pencils. We've practiced with whatever tools that we use, and we do it. We become this complete and perfect, not lacking in anything. We're able to endure when the trials come. We're able to endure when these trials come. So, trials, I am hurrying because I know I only have 15 minutes. Trials help make us practical. But the second part is this: trusting helps make us practical. Trusting in God will help make us practical. It will help make us efficient as we're going about doing this thing we call Christianity. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. You know, the first thing I see there is that we must make an honest inventory of ourselves. Who enjoys doing that? We must sit down and say, okay, I need to make an honest inventory. I have never went through this before. How do I go through this, God? How can I go through this trial? I don't know. And then God says what? Let him ask of God, who gives to all generously, without reproach. Wait, this is a lot like school, is it not? When the teacher says this is what we need to learn and you don't understand it, usually you get to, well, I didn't ever have to walk all the way to the front of the teacher's room. I just sat right beside her. But I would look over and say, hey, Mrs. Copeland, how do I do this again? How do I do this? And you know what? I don't think I ever had a teacher tell me, Chuck, I'm not telling you that. Will God do that to us? We make an honest inventory of what we need, and we ask God, and God says, listen, I will give it to you generously. And it's a promise. It is a promise. But we also have to ask trusting, correct? We have to ask trusting. He must ask in faith without doubting. What is doubting? What's doubting? It's like those little boys I was telling you about. They just didn't believe that they could do it, right? Do we ever doubt ourselves? Every single day I doubt myself. And I probably shouldn't. Well, maybe I should. All right? I don't know. We doubt. It's that mental war where you know you've got to do something, but you're just not for certain of your ability to do it. But here's the thing. Did God say he would do it? I didn't hear you. Did God say he would give you the wisdom if you needed the wisdom? Yes. So if we're doubting, are we doubting us or him? We're not supposed to doubt God. If he said he'll do it, right? Do not doubt. Ask in faith without doubting. Because the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Now, I have never even seen an ocean, okay, except on TV. But I was watching this show the other day. You guys like Survivor Man? Old show? No, he's lots better than Bear Grylls anyway. So he has to go out and survive these scenarios. So they throw him in this little lifeboat, and they put him out on the ocean. You can't see anything anywhere, and he's supposed to drift. And, of course, there's producers, and they said, he's going to drift right into these islands, and he'll be all right. Well, about a day in, he looks down, and that lifeboat has this little drag anchor. And he goes, you know what? I bet if I pulled that drag anchor in, that I could get closer to one of those islands. So he pulls it in. And that night, he floats for like 20, 30 miles. It was great. Problem was, it was just in a circle. Right? He had no direction. He had no anchor that was getting down. He was just tossed about on the top there. We do that sometimes, don't we? We pull up that little anchor thinking, okay, I'll go faster. And we have lots and lots of motion, lots and lots of movement, and we're not getting anywhere. When we ask, we don't doubt. We let our anchor be in Christ, and we let Him follow us. And then we will receive. That man ought not to think or expect anything, that he will receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded, unstable in all of his ways. What's it mean to be double-minded? Kind of doubting, wishy-washy. This is a term used for drunkenness. Drunkenness. You ever seen a drunk person? They think, okay, I can stand up and I can walk across there, and that's what one part of their mind says, and the other part of their mind says, fall flat on your face. Right? We're not supposed to think drunkenly. We're supposed to think the way God thinks, not try to manipulate God into thinking the way we think. Does God think the way we think? Most of the time not. We're supposed to take our thinking and lay it upon God's thinking and think that way, not vice versa. If we will just trust, our lives can be extremely practical for Christ. If you don't trust your saw to cut a straight line, you might as well not even start it, right? You might as well not even start it. Okay, last thing. Look, I've got time. Verse 9. By the way, these 3 points are actually the 3 points of the most of James here. Verse 9. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. The poor man is to glory in his high position. The rich man is to glory in his low position, because like a flower of the grass, he will pass away. I know what it's like to live poor. I was thinking about this while we were driving back yesterday, Brian. Once upon a time, I went and I spent the night with a friend of mine. I was a young kid. I was probably 8 or 9. And we're at his dinner table. And being the intellectual that I was not, I was making conversation with him. And I brought up the fact that, man, it sure is nice to have lights on. And you should have seen the look his parents gave me. See, I really didn't understand that there were families that didn't have their lights and their water and their gas turned off all the time. We couldn't afford it all the time. I know what it's like to be poor. But you know what? That's not what defines me. Now, I consider myself very wealthy now. We don't have our electricity turned off. I'm excited. Right? It's not our lowest state. He says, listen, if you're poor, what do you look for? You look forward to the glory of Christ. But if you're rich, it's not what you have here. What county do we live in? Anyone know? Or I'm sorry, you may not live here. What county is this church located in? Potter County, right? Who is Potter County named for? Mr. Potter. Anyone ever heard of Mr. Potter? Robert Potter from North Carolina. No? Yes, he is from North Carolina. Robert Potter from North Carolina was in the North Carolina Senate until he had a little problem and maimed a couple of people, and they kind of kicked him out. Went to prison for it. Then got elected again. America! And then they kicked him out because he was cheating in cards. Decided, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Texas. I've had enough of North Carolina. Actually, he's one of the signers on the Texas Declaration of Independence. Guess what? There was one person out of the 150 people in here who had heard of Robert Potter. A teacher, right? All of these things that we can do, all these plans with the money, guess what? They kind of fade away, don't they? They kind of fade away. There's a few very wealthy people that you know their names. Carnegie, right? Rockefellers. A few of them. Not a lot. Tiffany's. There's some. But by and far, that's not what it's about, is it? Christ says, listen, it's not what your plans are here for you. It's what you're doing with what you have here. And I think this applies to whether we're rich or we're poor. I did this lesson for one reason. I thought Brian needed it. No. God has been talking to me about it. God has been talking to Chuck. Chuck, be more practical in your Christianity. It's not about my tool collection. It's not about anything like that. It's about me living practically here and building. Not something that's going to be forgotten, but the kingdom of Christ. That's what practical Christianity is all about. The sun rises with the scorching wind, withers with the grass, flower falls off, beauty of its appearance is destroyed, so too the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. But, verse 12, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. Blessed is that person who, whenever all of these tests come, we go through them. Now, personally, I have felt in school the desire to jump up and run away from the tests. I felt that in life, too. Doesn't usually work, does it? We persevere. Because once he's been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. What's it all about? This practical Christian life is not about how much I gather here. It's not about how many people know my name. What it's about is Jesus Christ. He gives us these tools. And then, if you will notice, as he starts giving you these tests, these trials, whenever he gives you the tool of faith, they kind of get a little bit more difficult as you go along, don't they? A little bit difficult. But if you learn how to use it one way, then you can use it a little bit better the next way. All right, I think I only know 3 or 4 of you in here that have a hand plane. Anyway, you ever flattened a board with a hand plane? Bill, you have. Remember the first time? You take that hand plane, after about 8 or 10 swipes like this, guess what? You can't feel your arms. And then about another 8 or 10 swipes, and guess what? you can't feel your shoulders. About another 8 or 10 swipes, and you can't feel your knees. And you're like, holy smokes, I don't think I'm ever going to get this done. But you persevere, and you do it. And guess what? The next time you pick up that hand plane, and you've got to flatten a board, it doesn't just take 8 or 10 swipes to get you tired. Then it's 20 or 25. And the next time, it's a little bit less. And you persevere, and you keep working. God's like that with the tests, the trials that He gives us. So, instead of throwing up our hands and screaming and crying because we've got tests in our lives, what should we do? Oh boy, here's another one, right? The neat thing is this. We got to quit. The neat thing is this. It's not my power doing it. It's not my arms. God may be using me, but it's Him. You will face trials. Merry Christmas. You will, right? You will be put in positions where you have to use faith, where you have to trust God. Does that mean God hates you? No. My teachers did, but God did not. God loves us. He's doing this so that we can grow to be these Christians who are actually useful. Now, all you have to do, I hesitate to tell you this because it may destroy some of you. Go home and turn on news. For 5 minutes, okay? For 5 minutes, and you will see how needed you are as a strong Christian in this world. It has been 3 years since I've watched a newscast, and guess what? I am super stoked about that. I do not miss it at all. Not at all. This world needs Christians who are practical. We use our salvation a lot, right? But God's given us other tools. He's given us the tools of ministry. He's given us the tools that we can listen. He's given us the tools of exhortation. He's given us the tools of giving. He's given us the tools of teaching, whether it's in a classroom or it's these little kids in our lives, our grandkids and our kids, great-grandkids. He's given us these tools. Let's take them out of the box and let's use them. Now, you know Mr. I'm talking to you like you're a bunch of kids, don't I? You know me. I do not believe in 35-minute long invitations. The very first tool you need to live a practical Christian life is salvation through Jesus Christ. If you do not have that, that is where to start. If you do not start right there, none of the rest will work. If you need salvation, if you've never come to a point in your life where you've said, Jesus, I'm a sinner and I need you to save me, come right down here. Talk to me. There's a bunch of us who would love to talk to you. We will not strong-arm you, okay? We will tell you what the Bible says, and you make your decision. That's the only way it works. But if you're a Christian, here's what I want you to do this week. Look in your toolbox. Dig out some of those tools we're not using. Dust them off, sharpen them up, and let's go and win this world for Jesus Christ.